Welcome back to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman. Let's get to some New York political stories now. First up, casinos. The first group of 22 wannabe casino operators have submitted proposals and $1 million application fee each to try to win one of the 4 licenses available for Vegas-style casinos in the Empire State. But most of the applications are for locations in the Catskills Hudson Valley region, the region that's closest to New York City. Casinos were sold as rehab for abandoned and deteriorating Catskills resorts like Grossinger, as shown here, and to boost the economies that have lagged as the old resorts have faded. But many of the proposed sites aren't in these areas, and some are so close to the city they could siphon off business from the 2 racinos in and near New York City, those at Aqueduct Racetrack and the Empire City Casino in Yonkers. Let's bring this to our panel, and we're joined now by Michael Tobman, Democratic political consultant. Hi, Michael. And, of course, author and journalist Dominic Carter stays with us as well. And first of all, 22 applications for the 4 casinos. That's about where we thought the number would be, right?
It is. The $1 million application fee, which you had to pay before attending what was a mandatory conference this past, I think it was Wednesday in Albany, is refundable if you pulled out now. Pretty soon the state is going to start spending down the $1 million of each applicant. So at some point, if you do pull out, you're not going to get your whole $1 million back. But very soon, at the end of June, you have to put the application in, and that's when we're going to see who your financial backers are. And the level of disclosure that's going to be required of financial backers, not just for those giving the money, but then if you're getting investment from a local business, they have to open their books and their lenders have to open their books. It's going to make like getting a top secret security clearance in Washington like a walk in the park. So pretty soon it's going to be where the rubber meets the road. We
were close to getting our application and it was just the $1 million that was the obstacle. Now, when this was sold, it really was sold particularly in the Catskills region as rehab for the not just the casino or the hotels, the resorts, but also the economies that were stagnating in the Catskills region. But it turns out the casinos could go anywhere in the 3 counties that comprise the Catskills and the Hudson Valley region. I know you've worked on casinos in the past.
Yeah.
What do you think the likelihood is of these casinos actually winding up in some place, that's not in one of these rehab areas, and the threat of it being close to New York City?
It's there. I don't know that putting it in Lower Orange County, which is not economically distressed, they want to put it near Woodbury Commons, which I'm told is one of the top tourist destinations in New York State, not Niagara Falls, not our state parks, but rather Woodbury Commons. So they don't have the needs that the Catskills have. And then you have a Southern Tier casino where you could put one,
in the Southern Tier,
which could either be in the proper Southern Tier at the gateway to the Finger Lakes, wine country, Riesling, things like that, closer to Pennsylvania, Wilkes-Barre and the Poconos, or all the way up in central western New York. That's all up in the air, and then a North Country one in the Adirondacks around Lake Placid.
But if this turns into a situation where the actual casinos aren't where they were originally promised, or where voters were led to believe they were going to be, because this had to go through a constitutional ballot in the election last year, is there potential for blowback for Governor Cuomo or for anybody else involved in this process?
That's a very good question. What I worry about, and maybe you can answer this as someone that's actually worked on the casinos, and I think most residents of this state are worried about, is it a classic bait and switch, in terms of the locations of the casinos. And I don't care what anyone says. Take Niagara Falls, Canada, Niagara Falls, New York. And they're like night and day when you look at the lights in Niagara Falls with that huge casino there. And then when you turn to basically outside of Buffalo, about 30 miles, it looks...
We already have casinos in New York State. They're Indian casinos on Indian territory. So the question is where you locate these now non-Indian commercial casinos to fit with, pulling gaming dollars from other states rather than just cannibalizing New York. But I think your question's a great one. I think that Governor Cuomo's record going into re-elect on something he staked so much political capital on last year will depend in some part on being able to deliver on what voters approved.
Has not come up yet in the gubernatorial campaign, but it still may well at some point. My other question about all of this is, if you're a stakeholder in Empire City Casino in Yonkers or Aqueduct, which is the Resort World, I guess is the name of the casino there, you're saying we got all these people who are coming to play, but we only have video games. We have, slot machines and video blackjack and video roulette and video craps. Why can't we get the real thing in our, if you're allowing real casinos across New York State, Do you think they have a legitimate claim or a legitimate gripe in that department?
Well, as an attorney, I would say they don't actually have standing to challenge what happened. But remember last year when the voters approved in November 2013 whether or not to allow casino gaming as part of the constitutional amendment process, we had a mayoral election in New York City. So we, in New York City, were going to have our millions of votes compared to what was going on in the rest of the state. By removing the issue of the immediacy of casinos in New York City and Long Island, Nassau County had a county executive race, Ed Mangano and Tom Suozzi. By removing that issue from the voters' minds, it just became not controversial. So if it was in New York City and Long Island last year, maybe the ballot referendum would have failed. And I don't think that anyone in Albany wanted that.
Are you telling us that politics played a role in all of this?
Right, there's gambling going on here. I'm shocked, right? So it's pun intended.
Well, again, we'll see how this plays out and see if it pops up into the governor's race. As for the governor's race itself, let's get to the issue of the week for this week, housing discrimination in Westchester County. That was the subject of a 2009 lawsuit and settlement by the county that Westchester didn't do enough to promote and further fair housing in the county. Rob Astorino, the presumptive Republican nominee for governor, campaigned on the issue in the 2009 race that made him county executive and said he would abide by the deal. This week, state Democrats hammered Astorino on the settlement, saying he has fought it tooth and nail and likening him through the ads to opponents of civil rights in the 1950s and 60s. Astorino fired back in a web ad asking Governor Andrew Cuomo, "How dare you, Governor?" and questioning why Cuomo, a Westchester resident, hadn't spoken out on the issue until Astorino was running for governor. Today, the New York Times, which was quoted in the original Cuomo ad, chimed in on its editorial page, writing, "Politicians bitterly defying the federal government over racial discrimination is an old American story, but not a dead one." You can find it in an angry campaign video posted this week by the Westchester County Executive Rob Astorino. Paper also determining, quote, Mr. Astorino has been contemptuous of the order signed by his predecessor in 2009 and has dragged the county's feet in complying with it. This obviously, when you knew it was going to be Astorino versus Cuomo, and we'll find out officially in 2 weeks' time at the Republican convention, this would have been the first issue that would have been teed up on both sides. You knew it was going to come up in the campaign. First of all, how do you think both sides have handled it this week, and who do you think comes out ahead?
Well, we're looking at this purely from political points of view. It's smart by Team Cuomo. Throw Astorino on the defensive, define him before he gets a chance to define himself. Astorino, I mean, all's fair in politics, right? He's no racist. You get to know him. He's a very, very decent and good man. But he's going up against Andrew Cuomo. And guess what? Here's a taste of what you're going to deal with.
The county executive is a good man, and I sincerely believe he is not a racist. I don't think there's any racial animus here. I think this is just something that happens in government. It would hurt the county executive in his run against the incumbent governor, but I still call it a net wash because the county executive's votes are not in New York City. And they're not really in communities of color. They're in the suburbs and the exurbs. So if you look, Governor Pataki was constantly chided also on the editorial pages of the New York Times and others for not moving fast enough to settle the campaign for fiscal equity, the CFE lawsuit. And yet Pataki's numbers never dip below the high 50s, low 60s in Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, Orange, Rockland, Putnam. So, to their respective bases, it's bad for some, it's good for others.
Well, that gets to my next question about the base, because Astorino has not been shy in defending his position, in dragging his feet, or in however you want to characterize his handling of this settlement, going on Sean Hannity's show and talking to any conservative outlet that he can and saying this is about protecting us, the communities in Westchester, from the overreach of the federal government. Is there a chance that that has something of a dog whistle effect on his base and can help actually bring out more votes than he might otherwise get?
The issue is immensely complicated. I'm not saying anything everybody doesn't already know, but for example, in Nassau County, I was involved in the reassessment of property values, which were attacked for being racially discriminatory because communities of color were predominantly assessed at a higher rate from 60 years ago when the wealthy parts of Nassau County were closer to New York City, and then as it spread eastward that changed. We weren't called racists. We were just trying to get the plan right. I mean, this is a massive restructuring of the property tax values in Nassau County, and it needed to be done quickly, and everyone was accusing us of dragging our feet. It just wasn't the case. The county executive is not a racist, but could this be done quicker? Probably.
I want to get into one of the claims that Astorino made in his video, and I mentioned it in the setup, that he said, look, Andrew Cuomo lives in Westchester County. He's been a Westchester County resident for years. didn't say anything about this until Astorino was the nominee or the presumptive nominee for governor from the Republican Party. Is there, I mean, certainly that's true. He hasn't said anything, but is there any validity in that smack back from Astorino? And does that put Cuomo on the defensive in any way?
I don't think it puts Mr. Cuomo much on the defensive, but Astorino was right. Hey, this is your backyard. This is your community. Where were you on this issue, Governor? But Team Cuomo will say, we're not the local official representing the county. You are, Mr. County Executive. So, I mean, this has been an issue that was around before, 30, 40 years before Astorino. I have a funny feeling it'll be around 30, 40 years after Astorino. Some see it in racial terms. Others, like myself, do not. Mr. Astorino says he's trying to defend the community and protect, I shouldn't say defend, protect the community and its resources and values and so on. But I could, to throw the tag at him, it's very effective. It throws him on a defensive.
It feels early. I believe it's a net wash, but I think if the county executive wants to turn around and talk about the ever-increasing diversity of Westchester County as a foil for that, it's something he could do. But it feels early. It's something that could have been done in October.
We've heard some people question whether Cuomo went to this weapon a little too early in the campaign, in that it provides a platform for Astorino and it puts some exposure on him. I mean, 70% of New York State voters don't know who he is. We've already heard the argument that if Cuomo gets to define Astorino before Astorino can, it's to Cuomo's benefit.
I'm sure there are memos and opinions out there when Spano was a county executive that were on this issue. As Dominic said, it so predates the current county executive. It does feel like it's a little early.
All right, we're going to take a break here on RFL. When we come back, presidential politics. Jeb Bush and Chris Christie, the comparative moderates in the GOP ranks. But the race for the White House may not be big enough for the both of them. We got proof of that when RFL returns.